Colombia's fumigated around 2 million hectares of land with financial and military support from the United States. But many people, locals and Ecuadorians living across the border, have reported being poisoned.
Drugs don't just affect the people taking them. In 2018, it was reported that the vast amount of cocaine used across Europe was ending up in rivers at levels that could affect the behavior of freshwater eels. While no hyperactive, slightly overconfident eels were ever actually observed, it's important to remember that while we talk a lot about the human and economic cost of the war on drugs, this conflict also takes its toll on the environment. From the jungles of South America to the sewer systems of the Netherlands, we're looking at the environmental impact of the global illicit drug trade, separating the myths from the facts and asking who bears the responsibility. The rainforests of Colombia and Peru are considered to be the second most biodiverse natural habitat on Earth, home to 10% of the world's species. But they're also home to most of the world's cocaine production. And because coca farmers are scared of the police and military, they're forced to grow their crops deep inside the jungle.
La mayoría accede nomás, pero que muchas veces se oponen a que sean erradicados todo. Hay grescas, y necesariamente tenemos que usar a veces lo que es gas lacrimógeno.
This has led to a persistent narrative that coca production is responsible for the destruction of the rainforest, a claim that's been repeated by commentators from Colombia to the US and Europe. But what has emerged is a pattern of drug traffickers laundering the profits they make from the cocaine trade by buying up acres of the Amazon for cattle ranching.
Wherever drug trafficking nodes are established, what you see is it's almost as though a bomb has gone off and created these concentric rings of absolute devastation of forests and dispossession of small farmers and indigenous people.
This form of damage to wildlife has even earned its own name, narco-deforestation. While this is a snappy title and has been seized on by politicians to shame drug users, it's actually a bit misleading, as the actual environmental impact comes from farming and has nothing to do with the production of the drugs themselves. However, one thing that is absolutely true is that making cocaine requires some pretty nasty chemicals.
En esta parte de la selva utilizan un método que le llaman o le denominan el método del solvente o el método colombiano. Un tanque de agua de 3.000 litros y ahí van procesando con la hoja de coca a través de un proceso que lo mezclan con una más rápida.
It's difficult to gather exact data, but estimates are clear that every year tens of millions of gallons of kerosene, solvents, ammonia, and hydrochloric and sulfuric acid are used to create cocaine, all of which end up getting dumped illegally in the jungle. Of course, it's also important to remember that cocaine is used as a medical anesthetic, and hundreds of kilos are produced legally each year, largely by countries like the UK and the Netherlands, with none of these environmental impacts.
Yo tengo boleo machete, trabajo en plataneras, en cañeras, en muchas maneras, pero a veces se pone que no hay empleo y hay que buscar por donde salga, ¿no? Yo no estoy matando a nadie ni le estoy robando a nadie, simplemente estoy trabajando por la comida.
But it's not just the drug traffickers who are dumping toxic chemicals into the rainforest. Between 1994 and 2015, the Colombian and American militaries sprayed tons of the chemical pesticide glyphosate onto the Amazon in an attempt to destroy coca crops.
If the government comes along and eradicates your crop, they may be spraying glyphosate, a known carcinogen, on your family, your animals, and your neighbors. So it comes at great risk, but the needs of small farmers is often so great that they're willing to take that risk for the economic return.
In 2013, Colombia had to pay Ecuador $15 million in compensation for the severe health problems the spraying was causing to farmers along the border, and the spraying was suspended. But under pressure from Donald Trump, smaller drone spraying missions were resumed in 2018, and Colombian politicians routinely threatened to restart the larger spraying campaign, turning the war on drugs, very literally, into a war on nature. It's not just the rainforests of South America that are threatened by the war on drugs. The Netherlands is generally more famous for its semi-legal weed than its exotic, unspoiled wilderness. But the country is also the global leader in manufacturing MDMA, and this is having a serious environmental impact.
Deze waterloop die voert het water naar de stadsgrachten. En hier heb ik dus al een paar keer een synthetische drugsdumping in gehad. En hier lagen een stuk of 10 vaten, grote vaten van een paar 100 liter naar beneden gegooid. Dat drugsafval komt dus direct in de woonomgeving van de mensen.
The scale of this problem cannot be underestimated. Dutch police sources told Vice that in 2018 they were having to clean up a new drug waste dump almost every single day. This problem is so widespread, they've even had to coin a new word for it in Dutch: drugsafval.
Maar dit is een plek waar we een van de meest dramatische drugsdumpingen hebben gehad in Brabant. Er lag een heel groot vat waar 1000 liter drugsafval van de bodem in liep. Dus hier is een heel groot gebied, is de grond afgegraven. De bomen die hier stonden, die zijn doodgegaan, die zijn afgevoerd. Deze bomen die hebben natuurlijk ook al drugsafval meegekregen. En dat blad dat krult nog steeds raar en dat gaat in de loop van de zomer dood.
Because it's illegal industry, so they cannot go to a regular dump, a legal dump. They dump it in the forest, in water reservoirs, or they dump it on the street bit by bit. These are toxic chemicals. People run into it when they walk in the forest. So that's a huge problem which has not been solved.
Once again, there's no particular reason that MDMA production needs to be harmful for the environment. Many synthetic drugs are manufactured by pharmaceutical companies in the Netherlands every year. And because they're produced within a regulated market, the waste materials can be disposed of relatively safely. The only factor that drives illicit drug production underground is the fact it's illegal.
Dit jaar hadden we ineens gewoon 3, 4, 5 dumpingen per week van synthetisch drugsafval. Want de laatste 10 jaar is het zo erg toegenomen dat het grootste deel van mijn werk geworden is.
But even where drugs are legalized, environmental issues can still arise. The expanding legal cannabis industry in the US has come under frequent scrutiny for the amount of energy it consumes. To grow 1 kilo of cannabis in an inside grow room produces more than 4,500 kilos of CO2. That's roughly the equivalent of driving a car across America 11 times.
So this is the Green Mile. These are some of our mother plants. This is what we use to create new plants. And so when we look for genetics, we look for good, big, and fast. Those 3 things.
This is so exciting.
It's totally traceable. The state knows exactly how many plants we have in our system. They know when they're harvested, how much was harvested. They know everything about it. It's a manufacturing facility. We manufacture marijuana.
One of the main problems here is that due to security concerns, many state laws that permit cannabis growing require it to be grown inside, which is obviously far more energy intensive than growing it outside.
Indoor marijuana cultivation uses a lot of energy because we're creating a fully synthetic agricultural environment. We're taking what would typically be done in an outdoor setting and we're moving it indoors. 100% of the lighting is synthetic lights, so we put in really high-powered lighting, and that creates a lot of the energy profile. And then the other piece of the major energy profile is the HVAC systems that have to run to create that uniform environment for heat and humidity.
The problem is obviously even worse on the black market, where people are forced to grow inside for fear of getting caught. Some estimates state that legal indoor cannabis grows consume 1% of America's total electricity supply, about equivalent to 1.7 million average-sized homes every year.
Jason currently runs a handful of indoor grows, like this one in Sonoma County. Like many industry veterans, he knows how to operate inside the law, outside the law, and in between. He started out in the black market, then gradually switched to selling to licensed medical distributors. But the medical client base is shrinking quickly as dispensaries move into the recreational market, where Jason isn't licensed yet.
If this keeps continuing, then we're going to have to operate this place as a black market grow to continue to pay for the legal grow.
However, this isn't so much of a cannabis problem. It's more of a America needs to get off fossil fuels problem. Cannabis production represents a small percentage of US agricultural energy consumption, but it gets undue attention because of the way politicians and sections of the media get a bit hysterical around anything to do with drugs. This hysterical coverage is a shame. The war on drugs has meant we've historically missed out on the potential environmental benefits of industrial hemp, which can make everything from cement to sneakers. It also ties into important aspects of how we talk about both the climate crisis and the drug trade, and whose responsibility they are to fix.
Coca growers grow coca in protected areas. They are driven there by supply reduction programs that eradicate coca in the place where they originally wanted to grow it, which are the more conventional growing areas. And so the only reason that coca becomes a problem in terms of delicate environmental spaces is because that's where growers are pushed through eradication campaigns associated with supply side reduction policies and the war on drugs.
Gebruikers van XC-pillen en zo, dat zijn vaak gewoon slimme, intelligente, hoogopgeleide jongelui. Maar die als op een festival zijn, wel een pilletje pakken en geen idee hebben wat daarachter zit. Heel concreet betekent dat ik zelf denk dat het belangrijkste wat ik nu kan doen aan dit probleem, dat is laten zien wat de gevolgen zijn voor de natuur en dan hopen dat jongelui inzien van ja shit, dit moeten we niet willen.
Illegal drugs can be bad for the environment, not because they're drugs, but because they're illegal. This is systemic. All of these products can be produced, transported, and consumed in much safer, greener ways as part of a legal, regulated market.
We'd like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs.